Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Roll Call. I am your host, Ryan Anderson, famous for voicing Varnas Halmaru in The Explorers of Evrand and Morwen Dulski of the Salamander Coast. And my guest here today is Mark J. Judge, famous for voicing Cecily of the Salamander Coast campaign, and I also have in my notes, guy who screams instead of yawns from the So Far So Good show. Is that...
Yeah, that's a gig I did, and I gotta say, of all the strange things that can be said about me in this portion of an interview, I appreciate those two being the most prominent. I play Cecily in a D&D game, and I was in a sketch once where I screamed instead of yawned.
Yeah, you didn't know I would do this deep dive of research, did you?
Oh yeah, man. You know, it's really funny. I was playing in a game with Eric yesterday, and I believe I introduced myself as that guy who was Marius in a community theater production of Les Mis.
Were you actually?
Yeah, I was. It was one of my favorite roles I've ever done. It was a great time.
Oh, yeah, good. I was about to ask how you did.
Yeah. I think I did very well. I guess it's up to everyone else that was there those few weeks, but everybody who... Yeah, everybody that came to my face told me I did a great job. There might be some behind the back scallywagging going on. I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. Not really my bother if they don't talk to me about it. So.
Yeah, we gotta take people at face value. If we think everyone's lying to us all the time, what a miserable existence that I had for a couple years at one point, and thankfully don't do that anymore.
Yeah, that would be... I have been in that anxious pit before as well. We're really just diving right in at the 2-minute mark, aren't we?
Oh yeah, no, that's what this is all about. We just get right into it. Have you? Yeah. Are you familiar with a comedian by the name of James Acaster?
I am familiar with. He's the guy who got on his knees right during that one bit.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that's a weird way to identify a man, much like identifying a man by screaming instead of yawning, but. True. That's what I know him from, that bit.
But based on what you said, it reminded me of one of his bits where he talked about how he got cabbaged, like it was a verb, and how basically this kid left cabbage, like a half wedge of cabbage in his room once, and how people keep sending him cabbage because he shared the story. And one of his lines was, "Now every time someone laughs at me, I think they're my enemy, which makes my job very difficult." And I was like, well, damn, that sucks.
Yeah, that's such an interesting... Man, I love jokes that have that sort of like drive home effect, where you you laugh, but then later you're thinking about it and you're like, oh man, that's... Wow. Do I do that? Do I have a complex like that? Should I be thinking about myself?
I just love his style of humor. It just hits me for some reason. But we're not here to talk about James Acaster. We're here to talk about you, Mark.
Yeah.
All right.
Me and my quickly distracted self.
Oh, dude, have you seen the other episodes of this show? Don't worry about it. Chaos is our middle name.
Nice.
All right, so I think we're just going to get some of the base questions out of the way. So I've heard from people kind of the base story, but I want to hear it kind of more, just kind of clearly from you. So... how did you, Joe, and kind of the whole SC gang kind of come to meet in the first place? Because I know that your guys are kind of like, I don't like kind of giving like titles or anything, but you guys were kind of like the college friend group. But just like, how did that get started? Like, what was the first kind of inception point of that meeting and friendship forming?
Well, I was in university in the spring of 17. So basically, I started playing D&D shortly after 5th edition came out, because I had like always known about it, and I had friends that had starter sets from 3.5, and none of us really knew what we were doing, but the concept was really cool. But at the time when I was kind of like growing up, in that sort of like 8-year-old all the way up to like 14 or so, D&D never sounded as cool as just playing outside.
Sure.
And grabbing some sticks and running around and just basically, little did I know I was pretty much just doing D&D already, just like making up stories, and I was usually like the leader friend when it came to that sort of like just making a story up as we went along and running around in the backyard and whatever. As I kind of was already like the dungeon master, but I had no idea. And then, you know, you become a teenager and you try to be cool and you lose yourself. It happens. And then 5e came out and I saw it getting popular. And I remember reading somewhere that it was like purposely a simplification of previous editions that was meant to appeal to a broader group. And obviously, to this day, there are still a D&D or 3.5 D&D people that think that 5th edition is kind of like a sellout. Maybe sellout is strong, but you know, it's just sort of like watered down. It's like reduced fat D&D. But for me, I was like, well, this is perfect because this way I can go and buy all this stuff and I can actually convince my friends who don't know a lick of fantasy or tabletop or anything and convince them to play because it'll actually be doable. We can, you know, you don't want to have 87 skills and an entire 2-page essay about how to grapple somebody. You know, like it's just, it just was simple and it opened the door to the thing that I really wanted to get back to doing, which was just sort of the storytelling. Now it was like playing outside again, but we were at a table and we had snacks and there was kind of rules, just kind of. And so I did that my senior year of high school. And I got to college, and as many people do when they first get into college, they're like, oh man, I was the one person in my social circle that did activity X or had identity Y, and now I'm going to meet other people who do those things. And that is simultaneously exciting, but it's also, you know, if you're somebody like I was when I was 18, it's also a bit of an ego check of like, you're not the only person who does this. And so a lot of us that were in this one dorm at college ended up becoming friends through various means, like group projects and classes we were in, and people living next to each other in dorms, and like film majors and theater majors and kind of overlapping. And it just ended up being that like a lot of us were friends in this just little section of the dorm hall. And it was very sitcom-y. I would just kind of run back and forth. And I was running my own game at the time with some people I had never met before. I had like met through a society that just puts groups together, and we were having a good time. But then I ended up finding out that like all of these new friends I was making in my dorm were playing with this guy named Joe. And I was like, I think I know Joe, the beard guy. And they're like, yeah, the beard guy.
That was Joe's nickname in college, the beard guy.
That's all I knew at the time. Like it was like, yeah, there's a beard guy.
Nice. He has a nice beard,
but
so fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was kind of like, you know, he already was in this position where it was like the entire friend group knew Joe as the dungeon master. Like he was becoming the D&D guy, and that went on throughout all of college. And I had my own group, and I did a lot of other things, but I was like, well, this is really cool. And I knew that his group was already like full. But I was very interested in getting to know him a little bit more, so that I would like know another dungeon master. And you know, we were already in the same circles, and then we did a few projects together, and he came to a reading of a play that I wrote, and he thought that I hated him, because most people do when they first meet me. But I did not, in fact. And yeah, we just ended up, you know, talking about the game, and by our third year of college, we were living together in a rent, and is that what you call that?
Did you say living together in rent?
In a rental? There you go. That's probably a better, yeah. Living together. You're
like, sorry, just it made me think of when people would be like, oh, those two are living together in sin, you know, like when they're not married, we live together in rent. It's like, what?
We were only together in rent, not in the eyes of God. but um, but yeah, and it was it was so fulfilling for me to like have another friend that was doing this thing, and we had such different approaches to the game and like different backgrounds as far as like the sort of styles we went for and the art that inspired us. But the unifying thing was like we were both kind of new at this, and we were both theater kids, and we both really loved the idea of kind of gathering around the proverbial campfire and telling a story with your best friends. Like that was the part of the game that was cool to us. And everything else was just kind of in service of that. Well, and so Joe and I and a lot of other RWA peeps graduate right into the pandemic, and that goes how you would expect, especially with arts degrees. But Joe calls me up one day, and he basically says, "Hey, you know, I've been recording sessions, and kind of like archiving them, and I've been messing around with this YouTube thing a bit, and I've been looking into how to stream stuff on Twitch, and I already have this other online group going on called the Explorers of Afera, and I know, you know, like we were kind of transitioning between in person and online, and now we're out of college, so we need to be online, but I feel like I really have my footing here, and I have a thing, and I want to try to do a thing. I want to try to actually put the stuff out there and maybe meet new people, inspire new people, and maybe have people, you know, participating and watching the stories that we make, because I think they're really, really cool. And it's kind of heartbreaking that the stories just sort of live and die at the table, and then that's it sometimes, you know? And it would be like really cool if they were just there, and like people were able to see them and they were documented. And I was like, cool. So you're gonna do that? And he was like, well, no, see, listen, I want you in on this, because you've always been like the other dungeon master guy, and I can't think of anyone else better to do this, and kind of just help me navigate all this other stuff. And I was like, sweet. All right, I want to play a teenage girl in your next campaign. And he was, and Joe, I remember him telling me months later that he was like, I never should have been nervous, because I should have known you and I should have trusted you. But when you told me that for the first time we were going to go live and try to do this thing, the character you wanted to play, you, Mark J. Judge, was an obnoxious teenage girl. I was like, yeah, well, I think it's proven to be fun. But yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And now I'm, you know, we're almost 2 years into this now.
Yeah.
And it's so strange to me thinking about, I mean, I know it's strange for all of us thinking about the versions of ourselves before this huge timeline splitting event that was the pandemic. But for me, one of the strangest parts is that, like, the idea of having internet-only friends was foreign to me before the pandemic. And now, this is like one of the largest facets of my life. It's basically 50% of my social life at this point. And like, you know, knowing all these people and participating in this meaningful hobby, that, you know, it's not just a time killer. It really is one of the best things I do with my week. And yeah, it's been really cool being the other DM. You know, I really have enjoyed that identity. I am proudly an uncle, and I enjoy the idea of being an uncle more than a father. And I think that energy has moved on over into here too, as I just, like, you know, Joe's kind of the master DM of everything, and he's like the octopus that all roads lead back to. That was a mixed metaphor. But, you know, I'm really honored that he asked me into this thing. It's just been a lot of fun, and I'm glad to be a part of it and welcomed into it. And it's just really fun being like the other guy, you know, just like the one who also does videos sometimes and runs little mini campaigns and stuff. And we think in the future of RWA that there will be a time where Joe is running one campaign and I'm running one campaign and it's more balanced. But, for now, it's like this is his baby and I am there 110% as much as I can be to just help this thing out and keep the community alive and help it grow into whatever it is meant to become.
Right on. And I mean, I think it's just interesting to see kind of like how RWA started because, I mean, I wasn't there from the Explorers of Affair in the beginning. I joined around like session 13 or 14, something like that. But, fairly close to the beginning.
Yeah.
And
close to when we streamed, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And thinking back to when we were on like Roll20 and like the art that we had and like the assets that were being used, even back then I was like, oh man, this Joe guy's like awesome. Like he does stuff so well and everything's so cool and so great. And one of the things I always admire about Joe is that like he's always finding something to improve. Because I remember when he was like, hey, we're going to change the stream overlay. And I was like, I mean, all right, like if you want it, I don't see how it can get much better. And then, oh my god, that looks so much better. What the fuck,
Yep.
It looks so much better. Like I love the look now. Like it looks so clean and smooth. And he's just always finding ways to, make it more personalized and just better. And it's just fun to see just such, passion that's brought in from him, but also from like all the other players and everything. Because, we all love this game. And I think we all miss it right now because while we're recording this, I don't know when it's going to be posted, but we're still on our current hiatus from the 3 campaigns. We just have a Rising Ash and the occasional Silent Shield game that's going on.
Right. The other guy here to fill in the time.
We also have Evrand going on too with John.
Yeah, we got Evrand. And Eric is doing a super secret thing, which by the time this airs will probably not be so secret. But
I didn't know about this.
Oh, well, it's a secret, you see.
So you won't tell me then? That's fine.
yeah, probably not yet. It's probably meant to be like a reveal.
All right.
I probably shouldn't have said anything. Oh well.
Well, I won't say anything to anyone. I won't even tell Joe you told me. I'll just wait for him to edit this. He'll be like, wait, what?
yeah, no, I mean, hopefully by the time this airs, it's not a big deal.
Oh. Alright, so going back to the game first, because I do want to get to you as a DM, but I kind of want to focus on your role as a player first.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few, I have kind of a compare and contrast list, Mark, between you and Cecily. You are not a young teenage girl who at once had a blue-like skin pigment thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, that's the clearest difference, for sure.
Right, like, metaphorically, I totally get it, but no, I'm just kidding. But, your father is not some tyrant who's, doing a bunch of evil in the name of good. Well, you're a guy who claimed to be your father. Sorry.
Right, yeah, no, let's not mix that up.
Yeah, no, that one's on me, I wrote that down poorly. But, the point that I'm trying to get is initially, because obviously, like, there's things that are introduced in the campaign. Like, as far as I'm aware, you didn't know that the whole, like, Thor and Tyr reveal was going to happen. That was something that Joe surprised you with through the story. That's correct, right?
Yeah, I had no idea. I left that completely open. I just told him that her eyes are gray and no one knows why. And he took that and her, kind of Scandinavian appearance and just went with it and did everything else. I had no idea.
And so I guess my initial question is, like, what was the very baseline inspiration for Cecily? Like, what made you want to play a character like this, and what did you draw upon to help kind of create her?
Yeah, I think part of it was that I was just kind of in a phase of my life, and still am, where as a writer, I was kind of coming out of writing about myself and trying to, because I think almost any writer learns how to write by writing about themselves. That is kind of where a lot of things begin, is just your own life and, you know, this breakup or this thing your parents said or this cool story you have
Yeah.
from the 1 week with your friends. And it may be kind of veiled in metaphor and it may not. But that's where a lot of things start. And then as time goes on, even though there's still a piece of you in all of the stories, it just kind of expands out. And I was just kind of in that phase where I was like, you know, I've written enough. For now, I've written enough scripts and poems and such about me and my own life and my own perspective. And I want to tackle bigger stories and grander concepts that aren't about that. So that's sort of just like the background info of why that was already kind of turning in my head. And right now, I just finished a couple weeks ago the first draft of a novel. It was the first time I've ever written a novel. Kicked my ass. But the protagonist of that book is also a teenage girl. And the protagonists of the last two screenplays I've written have been women. One was 20 and one's about 35. And so it was just, yeah, I was just kind of in this phase of like trying to find pieces of myself in people that on the surface aren't like me and just have a lot of different experiences just based on their identity. But I think the main thing for Cecily was normalcy. I just, something really appealed to me about being a human teenager in the world of Illica. Because, you know, I think that's the thing is, as Joe has mentioned, as I have mentioned, as all the players in SC have mentioned at some point, you know, the surface differences between me and Cecily are very clear.
Sure.
But when you get down to it, she's a human. And I have been a human teenager. And in that way, she is the most like me of any character I've ever played in a D&D game. I mean, she's just dealing with a lot of normal high school shit on top of all of the epic fantasy stuff that's also happening to her now. Like, she's just, you know, she just likes people and doesn't know how to express it and what it means, and she gets uncomfortable when people are actually being kind to her, and she has to learn how to let that in. And, you know, she wants to be passionate and have interests about stuff, but she doesn't want to come off as weird, so she gets ironic about it and pretends that she's not interested in things. You know, like, yeah, like, that's just me. That was just me when I was a kid. And I think it was really exciting to me, especially when Joe told us that this campaign was going to be really long. I was really thinking about that length, about how the campaigns that we had played during college were all designed to last a semester. And so as a writer, any character that I made, I was kind of thinking about it from the perspective of like how much time do we have and what kind of arc could be given to this character in the time that we have. And when you're doing it in a semester, things need to be just, I wouldn't say simple, but a little more bold. You know, like I played a lizard folk monster hunter who had trained all of his life to kill, and he spent the campaign learning that people also appreciate him for other elements of his personality, and he doesn't need to be a killing machine. And yeah, you know, and so that's pretty high, it's pretty bold. Like, it's a pretty bold character.
Sure.
And then I played Orville, who was a very old retired gnome who had been a scribe his whole life. and that was a level 1 to 8 campaign, and it was all about him having the first real adventure of his entire life. Again, pretty bold, just a simple thing where it's easy to give that character a journey.
Sure.
But Joe was like, we might be playing Salamander Coast for 2 or 3 years. Well, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make somebody that is subtle enough to be interesting for that long. And the more I thought about it, the more that just playing a human teenager who has the fantasy stuff happen to them, rather than be fantasy-ish themselves, it just started making more and more sense, and it sounded really fun to me. Yeah, and it really has been. I mean, because it's just ever since session 1, even, it's like anything that happens around Cecily, she's like, what the fuck? Like, what's going on? This isn't like home, and you'll see like the most standard fantasy monster, like just like an animal that's bigger than usual. And she's like, oh my god, that's bigger than usual. Like, it's because she's just a kid. Like, she just doesn't know, and she wasn't from any of the high fantasy places, like the Plane of Fire or something. She's just a person who kind of sucks. That's my pitch. That's my hard sell on Cecily. She kind of sucks, and that's why I like her.
So, I think you and I know very well that D&D, despite what some people think, is very much a team-based game. I know, shocking hot take on that one, but...
Right, yeah.
So, I think for me, like, whenever I have a character, obviously I don't pre-plan what their journey is. I'm never like, okay, this is, where he starts, this is where he's going, and, like, this is where it's gonna end. Mm-hmm. In my head, I always kind of have a rough idea of, like, well, if this person doesn't change, this is kind of how I see things ending. Or, like, this is what they would do when they have their free time back,
Mm-hmm.
But, things change. They have experiences with the party and NPCs and the story, and it, kind of causes them to, get molded and become a more rounded, better person or see things differently. So, for you, what do you think was kind of the main stuff like that for Cecily in the beginning? If you have, like, some examples of some of the other players, like, who or what kind of inspired the most change earlier on with Cecily, if any? Yeah. Or you can say none of them, they didn't do anything. That's also
well, it was somebody, so I will have to talk for longer than that, but it was it was a real balancing act in those first 30 sessions or so, which, god, that's a long time to be doing a balancing act, but to me it was I knew from the beginning that, like, the way that I made this character, if she stays that way, this isn't going to work out long term. So in that way, I had already thought of an arc. Because she's so, like, especially in the beginning, she just wanted nothing to do with any of these people she got thrown into this situation with. She was going through her own crisis and just wanted to get away from everybody and sort it out herself. And I knew that doesn't work, obviously. Like, Mark in the meta is very aware that this is a team game and wants to keep playing. Like, I want to keep doing shit with the party and I want to have fun.
Right.
But, I made this problem child. And I think for me it was sort of like, every session, I would see what the other players in the party kind of like threw out there. And then I would think to myself kind of, okay, how would Cecily think about this? What would her thought process be on that? And then next session, I would try to find ways for her to kind of slowly be okay with that, or maybe throw something back. And I let the arc that I sort of envisioned in my head fill in as time went on. Like, I knew that eventually she had to open up and accept all these people, but I had no idea how. I just left that up to everybody else. Huge moments have been with Bianca, I would say. I mean, her just being so chill about whatever baggage anyone is carrying. You know, she is the most wonderful listener. And that was really something Cecily needed. And it took her some time to realize that she could talk to Bianca, but, you know, once she did, it just became easier and easier to kind of let her guard down. And I remember very early on in the session, you know, Cecily said they were like in the middle of a job, and Bianca just kind of came up to Cecily and said, like, how are you handling this? And Cecily was like, what do you mean, go away? It's like, what are we doing right now? But, you know, Bianca asked how she was doing, and Cecily just had this moment where she said, you know, a week ago I would have been getting beat for not scrubbing the floors right, and now I'm here. So honestly, I don't know what to think about any of this. And then Bianca just kind of calmly said, well, I just learned more about you than I have this entire time. And if you ever want to talk about it, that'd be okay. But if you don't, I don't need to ask. So just let me know. And that alone, just that little thing of it not being a huge deal, and just sort of not making her do anything, was huge. And it eventually got to the point where, you know, Cecily would hand Bianca an apple, and Bianca would say, hey, I'm really bad at listening to people when I'm peeling this apple. So if you get anything off your chest, I won't even hear it.
Yeah, I always like those interactions between them in the game.
Yeah, and then, you know, so it became that. It became, let's pretend you're not listening because it makes it easier, but then please respond. Because I actually need help. Yeah, and Suni was another big one too, of just like having someone else in the group that got it. And they obviously had a lot of animosity in the beginning, and still do, in a sibling-like way, but yeah, they really, they got each other in a way that it felt like the other players, not the players, that's the wrong wording, that's not what I mean, but the other characters didn't have that lived experience, even if they understood it intellectually. And when Suni started to grow and kind of unlock his own destiny, something went off in Cecily's mind that said, well, if he can do it, then I must not be a lost cause. And so that was really big too. And yeah, and so those are big ones I can think of now, but that's a lot of what it was, is I just knew that she had to grow, or else it just wouldn't be fun to continue playing her. And I knew all of the people I was going to be playing with, so I trusted them with that. I knew that everybody in Salamander Coast, I could kind of put that in their hands, and they would make active roleplay choices and get my character involved and have interesting, meaningful things to say and make connections. And then when they tried, I would try to make them back in a way that made sense for her, and things would slowly build. I don't think I would have played Cecily in any different group, because I don't think I would have trusted the rest of the table, if I didn't already know them very well, to kind of like help that happen. And I'm just really grateful that it has, and like the space that has been given to that character for her to develop, and the bonds that she's formed with everybody. And, you know, now she's just kind of a dope who's trying to learn how to be nice, and it doesn't come naturally to her. Very Hey Zuko here energy a lot of the time.
Yeah, but we love our Zuko redemption arc.
Yes. Except this time it's just being a meanie, not like genocide or whatever. But like, yeah, I'm just very grateful. And I'm grateful that that kind of character that is, you know, from a more vulnerable side of myself, this sort of like young character that doesn't have themselves figured out at all and is thrown into an adult world in an adult situation. I'm just really glad that that character has been given space to grow by all of the wonderful people that I play with.
All right, so Mark, this actually works perfectly because we're going to segue into a brand new segment that we're debuting today.
Oh! Woo!
Yeah, so this one, it's called Favorites. So basically, I'm going to list something from the campaign, and I want you to pick, it doesn't have to be your favorite, it's just the catchiest name I could come up with, but one that stuck out to you the most, and, you know, why, obviously.
Alright,
so first off, just because out of everyone in the world, you should be the foremost Cecily expert. What would you say has been your favorite moment involving Cecily as a character throughout the entire campaign?
Oh, man. I'm gonna say that conversation with Tyr. That's one of the first ones that jumps out.
We've got old Gardener Tyr.
Yeah, because and truly props to Joe for that moment as well. I love symbolic parallels in stories. Like, that is my shit, when symbols or lines of dialogue or just like patterns keep coming up and they mean a different thing from every different perspective.
Okay.
And I just found it, like, I was getting goosebumps during that scene, not only because of the dialogue that was happening, but because we have this estranged, unrealized love plot thing that has just been simmering in the background with Cecily and Poe. And Poe had a similar conversation with his father in which he was having memory issues. And Poe was referred to by Freya as somebody lost in the Garden of Time, and Tyr is a gardener, and there's also this idea of weeds. And I even remember, you know, Poe having this Poe and Ashima moment from like 20 sessions ago, or 30 or however long it's been, where he was like, I hope I'm not just a weed in this timeline, like just something that is messed up and needs to get plucked out. And Ashima was like, people call dandelions weeds, like, and those are some people's favorite flowers. Like, it really just matters the garden, you know? He said it more monk-like than that, but
sure,
but he, like,
close enough.
But, you know, and then Cecily has that same thing, and then Tyr finds the flower called Little Cecily's, which is based on a real plant, by the way. And he pulls them up and says, some people think this is a weed, but I've always loved them. And I just, like, juicy shit, Joe. If you're listening, juicy shit. Like, all of those symbolic threads of the memory loss and the identity crisis and being lost and weeds and gardening and estranged fathers, and the fact that neither Cecily or Poe know that those conversations have even happened. Like, and the fact that they are intertwined in the breadth of the universe to be similar people on a similar path and, like, eventually reunite, and if nothing else, have a very close bond because of that. Like, that shit is so fucking cool. Bada bing, baby. I like it. I'm done.
and then you just had Morwen sitting there, just feeling sad, watching what was going on that entire time.
Yeah, and she was like, "I just got a really cool new axe, but I feel like now's not the time."
Yeah, now she was really trying not to geek out about that when all this serious shit was going on.
Yeah, man. So yeah, that I mean, obviously, and the actual role play of it was so fulfilling because it felt like, obviously, it was this huge moment in Cecily's arc, and I feel like, especially with the fact that she had literally just died in the session before,
True.
it was like that was the turning point of turning points, really. Like she will not be the same person in her second life after everything that happened in the first. And that conversation was so huge. But then you also had all this thematic shit going on in the background of it that was just so cool. It really was like any moment from my favorite movies or books. It was so cool.
So we're just because we're talking about this and it's my show and I can do whatever I want. So we're gonna tangent off of favorites for just a second since we're talking about this anyway.
Yeah.
So Cecily has the lantern. She's had it for some time now.
Yeah.
And she hasn't really done anything with it. Is that more out of a fear of like, oh, if I release a soul in the past, maybe that's a problem because maybe it can't find its way to Tyr's current body, which would be a valid question, I think. Or is it she doesn't know what to do? Or I'm just curious because we just haven't seen it yet, so...
Yeah, it's a huge can of worms for sure. Now that the time stuff is settled, I think it will be a thing that really comes up. And it's, there are so many things that I could talk about with Cecily, and that's almost the double-edged sword of having a character that you've thought about so much and who has such a rich backstory.
Of course.
Is that it's like, it's almost like playing an open world RPG. Well, I mean, it literally is, but like a video game open world RPG.
I've sunk like 80 hours into Elden Ring, so you're speaking my language right now.
Like you have like the main quest, and you're like, yeah, but also, there's the thing with the faction that gives you the icicles. So I need to go do that. Like it's just kind of like that. It's like I want Cecily and Carasilla to talk about performing. I want that to happen. I want I want Cecily and Bianca to have more conversations about identity and self-confidence and feelings and shit. There's so much that could happen. And when we were doing the heist in Bromsgrove, like she was just locked in. It was like, all right, we got the soul. I have the lantern, but A, I'm still processing how I feel about everything that just happened. And B, we're in the past, and that might get fucky. I have no idea if we're even gonna live, so I don't know. I don't know what happens if I let go of this. And then C, we busy. There hasn't been a second in which we're not busy. Because we're saving the world.
And I mean, D as well, like, we don't know how to release the soul. Like, it's probably not as simple as, okay, well, let's just smash this thing on the ground. Like, there's probably a little bit more of a delicate science behind that, if I had to guess. I could be wrong. Maybe Joel will just be like, yeah, you just had to smash it. No, my bad. But I'm just assuming
there's like a little lever on the front.
Yeah, it's a pull door. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, that's the thing, is there's just always so much. For a girl that has a crush and is maybe adopting a new religion and has died, like there's a lot. But yeah, I do think it'll be something that comes up now in this next arc, because now that they're sort of back in the right time, and she knows that Odin and Thor are after them, and that that is a serious impending threat, and they're going to continue to pursue them however they can. Getting back to Loshar and figuring out how to like awaken Tyr is probably the only real way they can stand a chance against that whole family. So yeah, I really think, and and then obviously emotionally, it's very important for her to have that fulfillment, because I believe it was a Cecily and Morwen conversation, actually, right, about how she was like, what would you be doing if we weren't saving the world?
Yeah,
and
because
Cecily,
Morwen was just like, you've talked about how you feel like you don't belong here, or you shouldn't be doing this. It's like, well, you know where your dad is. Like, you can go, air quote, home now, if that's what you want to do. And so it's kind of one of these, like, well, why aren't you then? Like, why are you walking in this direction and not the other direction?
Exactly. And the truth of it is that, she has a complicated relationship with the idea of blood family, that has now been bestowed upon her by this old blood thing, because the notion in her head her whole life has been that your blood family really doesn't matter, because sometimes they just can't provide for you. Sometimes they really suck. And figuring out where she came from was very important to her. Like, as soon as that door was opened, she needed to know. But, she, before everything that had happened, she was planning on going the rest of her life not knowing and finding a chosen family of some sort. And the party was that. It ended up being that once she opened her heart to these people that just got thrust into her life. And as fulfilling as it would be to just kind of, go back to Tyr and give him his soul and just be Cecily and Tyr hanging out in the garden, she is much too close with all of these people now to just let the world burn while she's hanging out with her dad that she never really knew anyway.
Playing a fiddle while the world burns.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's just... And obviously there was an immediate emotional bond that Cecily will never forget, but, she has been with this group of people, and she has been fighting the good fight for a very long time now. And she just doesn't quite know that guy well enough to be like, good luck, squad. I'm hopping out of here. I hope you find somebody else that can do a combined 150 damage in a round with a well-placed lightning bolt. Like, she knows that, like, and ever since dying too, there's the thing of like, well, I've been across that edge. I don't want anyone else to cross that edge. So if someone needs to die to prevent this heist, I guess I'll do it. Which is, fucked up for a 16-year-old to have developed that complex, but that's where she got. I mean, she really appreciates living, but she also knows that she would rather all of her friends be alive. But, now that didn't work out either, so...
Yeah...
Cecily, all these... all these lies you tell yourself, you poor child.
All right, we're gonna jump back to favorites, if that's good.
All right, favorites.
All right, in Sound on the Coast, what has been your favorite arc so far? Specifically, more story arc, but if you want to talk about a character arc, that's also fine as well. But preferably more story arc based.
Yeah, I think of like the main 5 big story chunks, there's like, because I have I keep track of like the story so far abridged in the server, so it's not a session by session, like paragraph by paragraph thing. It's just like big chunks.
Yeah.
And so I have it 1 through 15 is when the original party is mercenaries, and they do that for a while, and they get to know each other, and they get out of it. And then there's the ruins of Kalukatho and all that stuff, and defeating Daku, and seeing the future for the first time. And then there's Odin later, and the heist later, obviously, is the most recent one. But I think my favorite so far has been the session 27 to 38 chunk called The Race Against Time. And that is basically when we first met. Session 27 is when we first met old Nalthian, alone in a wasted timeline.
Yeah.
And because, you know, it's hard to describe the scale of the feeling, you know, because I feel like a huge thing in shows, in any art really, but like longer form series, I should say, a huge thing in a series is the way that power scales and stakes scale over time.
Sure.
You know, if you start out too high and you have nowhere to go, you burn everyone out. If you jump too far ahead, you lose the audience. If the stakes get lower after they were really high for a long time, that's not always a terrible thing. In fact, sometimes you need a breather, but you know, it gets risky. And I absolutely like the amount of hours. So that's session 1 to 26 before we found out about this whole thing of old Nalthian in the future, and this is what everything will turn into if he wins, and the only way he doesn't win is if you go stop this heist. What is 26 times 4? That would be like 104 hours.
Yep.
Yeah. So think about, like, you know, Frodo attends the Council of Elrond 90 minutes in and learns about the gravity of everything and all the different factions that have been affected by this, and then the Fellowship is formed.
Right.
And that feels like a really big deal because we took 90 minutes to get here, and the stakes and his understanding of the world slowly expanded as time went on. And then eventually we get all this lore information, and it's like, holy shit, like this is a huge deal. But take that and make 90 minutes 104 hours. Like, you know, the idea of traveling across time to defeat a powerful entity, love it. You know, I absolutely love it. But never before has that idea scared me so much. Because this isn't like, you know, like we spent over 100 hours being, in comparison, normal adventurers who were doing normal stuff. And then this Dark One thing, we got wrapped into it even though we really shouldn't have been because we were only level 4. And then, all of a sudden, you know, we get this huge information dropped on us, and yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for spending that long feeling normal.
Yeah.
And then all of the sudden, you know, the stakes going insane. And I just, personally, I felt so charged during that entire stretch of time. Like when we got the mission, and it was this huge make or break thing for Cecily, where it's like, all right, well, fuck, I'm in this now. Like, there's no, you know, I can't just have not seen all of this and just walk away. This is, I am in this now, whether I want to be or not. I would never live with myself if I just quit. And, you know, and it's worth noting that in session 27, that's when we first heard that we had to prevent the heist of Bronzegrove, and session 57 is when we finally did.
Yeah.
So, wow, that was a long loop to close. Oh boy.
Yeah, it was.
And so, yeah, but the start of it, that's been my favorite so far, I think, because it just, and then Desmond became Sunni, and Poe had to leave, and the Dulskis joined, and it felt like this perfect, it was such a perfect way for them to be integrated into the story, because we had already heard of the Children of the Flame, and it was a way to bring in a second perspective and raise the stakes and expand the complexity of everything while keeping the story on the track it was already on. And it was just such a great addition. And it just felt like this was the arc where everybody, we entered the second tier of play hard, I think that's what I liked about it so much, is that in the beginning of the player's handbook, they define it like level 1 to 4, you save a village. Level 5 to 10, you save a big city from a big threat. Level 11 to 16, you are defining the fate of the world. Level 17 to 20, you're defining the fate of the multiverse. We crashed into that second tier, and it felt like it. It felt like all of a sudden we went from level 4s in a big pond to level 5s in the ocean.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I love that we still don't quite have our shit together, but we're getting there. And just that sort of, that forced growth that it put on everybody. Yeah, it was just so much fun for me, and how the entire understanding of the campaign and the continent and everything just exploded. That'd be my answer for that.
No,
but also the little arc with Hubert. I like Hubert, so that's answer number 2.
Hubert was cool.
Yeah, Hubert's cool.
That leads into my next question, actually, which you might have just given the answer. Favorite NPC throughout the campaign so far?
Well, okay, sorry, Hubert. I don't know if it's Hubert for favorite NPC. That's a little it's a little intense. I love Odin. I really do. And maybe it's because Cecily is the one that was done the most dirty by him.
Sure.
But I love how Joe just let the grayness of his character be. It wasn't like it was the thing of, we met him and he seemed like he was on our side at first, and then we slowly realized he was not, and now we're enemies. And that in that very broad, simplified sense, that's a pretty traditional thing, and I've seen that done before. What was so cool about it, though, is that he didn't go from white to black. He went from light gray to dark gray. Yeah. And we just slowly realized over time that this guy is a few steps over the line, and we're not going to be able to get along with him long term. And then he went a few more steps over the line, and we're like, okay, he's in our way now, and he hates us. And there's just something really cool about that to me, about how, there's the cliche saying of every villain is a hero in their eyes. But Odin really is the embodiment of that. I mean, his sort of tragic flaw to me seems to be that he's so sure that what he's doing is going to work and is for the greater good that he doesn't care what needs to get sacrificed for it. He's sort of a dark mirror to Dorian in The Children of the Flame, saying well, if these 10,000 soldiers need to die to save the world, then I guess they do. Odin is if I need to emotionally abuse this teenager and then kill her to save the world, then okay. So be it. I'll do it. Someone has to, and that's part of what I am doing in Rising Ash right now too, not to tangent too far, because I'm sure we'll talk about that. I'm sure we'll talk about Rising Ash a little bit later, but that's part of the thing with Ambrose, one of the main antagonists in that mini campaign that I'm running. I love the idea of somebody developing this complex where they think what I'm doing is wrong, but somebody needs to get their hands dirty in order to save everybody. And if it's gotta be me, it's gotta be me, and I will go down in history as a villain, and I don't care, because there will still be history.
True.
You know, that idea to me is so compelling, and it makes them so scary, because how do you convince Odin that he's wrong?
And I mean, I'm just so curious about Odin moving forward, because obviously this is someone who we haven't seen kind of the ramifications or like consequences of our actions with him yet, but there's going to be some, obviously, like that gun's gonna go off at some point. And because originally we were just like, we're gonna change the House of Bromsgrove, the timeline's gonna reset, and like Odin and us, we're gonna have no beef. Well, that's not how it played out. We still have mega beef with Odin. It's like, well,
absolutely,
crud, And so now we have, the challenge and like consequence of just kind of wondering of like, well, looking at like the grand scheme of things with like the Dark One, like Odin and his family and all of Fjarlith and like the army that they have, powerful asset that like could be on our side against the Dark One, because Odin is against the Dark One, he very much is. And is he the kind of person that we can really afford to get rid of? I think that's a question that's going to come up at some point. Like, as much as it sucks and we wouldn't want him, but it's just like, we've seen what Odin's capable of, like him alone. It's like, one, first of all, how do we deal with that? Second of all, is it better to take care of this other problem first and deal with the bigger problem versus this lesser problem?
Exactly.
And again, I think there could be arguments either way, and I'm excited to see kind of what people say, because believe me, like, Morin would know that that's not a fun or good conversation to have. But, when all of existence is being threatened, there are conversations that need to be had.
Yes, exactly. And the twins already had to learn that the hard way.
Yes.
They spent a couple dozen sessions learning that the hard way, and it was so painful to watch that happen. But now it's like, those are the kind of calls that the air quotes good guys are making. So maybe we need to too. Of just you have to let certain things happen for the greater good. But then there comes the question of like, what makes us so different than Odin? Because we're convinced that we're saving the world, but so is he. It's so... Yeah, so that's definitely why I'd easily pick him as my favorite. If I really sat here and like skimmed over the list, I'm sure I'd find a few runner-ups.
Sure.
But he really sticks out to me as just a really, really cool B villain for the Dark One. It feels wrong to even call him the B villain. I feel like he's the A villain, and the Dark One is the S villain. But he's definitely like our campaign's villain, and it's just so cool, the moral questions that open up. And I gotta say, one of the things I'm probably looking forward to the most in this entire campaign now is eventually Cecily and Odin having a conversation again. Because I have no idea what that looks like, but it doesn't look good.
Could you imagine, like, we're getting towards the end of the campaigns, and like, there's this meeting called for like battle strategies against the Dark One for like, the final battle at Bromsgrove. And like Odin or like Baldur or Thor or all three of them just like walk in, and just how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I can't wait. You know who Thor? You know who Odin actually kind of reminds me of? He reminds me very much of like comic accurate Doctor Doom, not the terrible like movie versions. Because like there was.
I'm only familiar with the terrible movie versions, unfortunately. So enlighten me.
And obviously, like every comic book and stuff is like different, right? So I mean, it's hard to just say like this is the comic accurate version. But like Doom is someone who very much feels that like what he does is necessary, and he doesn't take a joy from the actions that he does. And even when he's killed people, he's shown like regret of like, I wish it didn't have to be this way. You know, not like he's just some psychopath who's like, meh. But literally at one point, there's a storyline where like, I can't remember who's coming, if it's like Galactus or someone, but someone basically comes to like wipe out the world. And did you see Avengers like Infinity War, Endgame, all that stuff?
Yes, I did. I felt like I wasn't an American if I didn't go see this.
Fair enough.
It's such a huge event.
So, do you remember Infinity War when Strange is like, I saw 10,004,000 blah 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 possibilities?
Yeah, there's one where we win.
So, Doom had a similar experience where he saw a bunch of different timelines and how things played out. And he saw that the only one where the Earth survived was the one where he forcefully took it over and made himself supreme ruler. Because he basically put in actions and defenses and used the money and the resources that Earth had to better defend itself for what was coming.
Oh man, he's like Mr. House with his calculations in Fallout New Vegas.
And like literally, like when he saw it, the only line that he said afterwards was, "So be it," or like "if it must be," or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like then like it puts everything he does into like this different context, because while the heroes are stopping him from doing these like obviously like not good things, but he's just like, but we don't survive if I don't do this, because I'm willing to do what you're not.
Wow, jeez. And then God, and Ozymandias from Watchmen.
Yeah,
there's so many examples of this stuff now that I think about it, and I love all of those characters.
Yeah, which these are characters that I did not compare to Thor originally, so you know this is cool because I hadn't really thought about this before.
Yeah.
Sorry, Odin. Why do I keep saying Thor? Because I was talking about Infinity War. That's why. Odin.
Yeah,
Odin.
Probably. Yeah.
Odin.
Yeah.
But yeah, so all right, so I have a question, but there's like a caveat before I explain this one. Because obviously everyone we play with is great, and everyone has made some great characters. So when I ask who your favorite fellow PC is, I'm not asking you to list like, okay, well, who plays their character best, or who, you know, is the best player at the table. That's not what this question is. Just what's a character design PC-wise that you just felt was really inspired? You know, the kind of thing where you're like, that's a great idea for a character. I wish I would have come up with that idea. Not necessarily that, but just in regards to the creativity behind the character and how they've been executed. Just who's someone you'd want to put a spotlight on?
Is this SC or any of the three?
You can do whatever you want. This is my show.
Nice. All right. I think I'm going to talk about Bianca again, to be honest with you.
Okay.
She has always captivated me from the beginning of the campaign. And I think there's a real, you know, and Felicity would, you know, melt and say stop it if she heard me saying any of this and was in the room. But, you know, now she just has to hear me say it in a recording later. So, haha, got you. But, yeah, I just so, like, such a delicate characterization of somebody. She is very capable, but she's meek. And, you know, and it's not like, again, it's a severity thing. I feel like this is an idea I'm going to keep coming back to, of like almost any idea in storytelling in general or in D&D we've seen before. Like we've seen it all, but there's the characterization of it, you know, like we've all seen the character who like is really talented but very shy and down on themselves and doesn't feel like they're capable of things. But that's not Bianca. Bianca is this subtlety in between that I've hardly ever seen in a character, where it's, I know that I can do things if I have to and if the situation calls for it, but, you know, I'm just not the kind of person to really put myself out there. And, like, if I'm called upon, I will fight to the best of my ability. If the situation calls for my talents, I will help as much as I can. but you know, like, she's just not braggadocious. She's not bashful. She just is. She's like that person you meet, and then a month later you find out that they like won a Grammy. I'm saying that like I have met this person, I haven't, but like just for example, you know, like it just that energy doesn't radiate off of her at all. And then, you know, and then she brings it up like it's nothing. Like she's like, yeah, it's, you know, I have a demon. It's like, Jesus, lady. You know, it's so interesting to see somebody that is able to like just go through life and just like it seems like they're constantly only taking up the right amount of space. they're like conscious about that, and just gives everybody room to talk and asks people's point of view, and is able to be angry without yelling, and is able to be disappointed without getting bitter, and is like just able to, all of her emotions are so clearly portrayed, but none of them are very large. And it's just really, yeah, it's just really captivating. Like and I think Bianca is another character that works really, really well for a long campaign. You know, because it's like, she's like a friend that I know all of their little mannerisms now. Like I know when she says this, she actually, her emotions are bigger, but she's only saying, you know, this like little smaller thing, or you know, like just little things like that. And I also gotta say, just on base design, I like, Felicity told me when she was making Bianca, like, almost any female tiefling image you can find is sexed up.
Yeah.
And she basically was just like, fuck it. Like, I'm gonna make a fully armored, asexual tiefling. Like, I am just completely stripping that stigma from this character. I don't want it at all. And that is so cool. Not only in a hell yeah feminism way, which is also very important, of course, but it's also like, it's also just so cool to see a demon lady that's just like nice. She's just nice. She's a really nice person, and just so calm and level-headed, and doesn't have any of the surface level like demon or devil things going on that you would like immediately anticipate, you know, like an anger streak, or a flirts with everybody, or a compulsive lying, or like any of that stuff that is usually projected on to tiefling characters. Like, yeah, it's just, she's really, really cool, very subtle, in a way that's really captivating, and her ability to just let other PCs talk and be a good listener to them is so cool. Just like as a character and as like a fellow player, just really cool. Hell yeah, Felicity, love you, bestie, friend. Yeah.
You know what the best? You know what? Like what's a weird thing that comes to my mind when I think about Bianca? But like Bianca, out of all the PC characters, feels the most like a normal person.
Yeah. I think you just took my 5-paragraph essay and said it in a sentence.
Yeah, it's what I do.
Yeah.
English major, you know, so.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah,
I speak in first drafts.
When Joe and I were talking, because Bianca came up as one of his answers for like a PC that he really liked the design and creation for and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and we just talked about like her, and like one of the things I said was like, I like the fact that like it feels like a true like young adult story, and not young adult like the novels where like they're 14 having a young adult story, but like an actual young adult story, because like Bianca
Mid-20s.
Bianca like was like a fully fleshed out person. Like, you know, she had this family, like she went to school, she had friends, she had her own business, like she was living life, you know, like Bianca could have been an NPC. She could have been. But like I like the fact that now it's like, and now we're here.
Yeah, like she already had all of her growth arcs, and now she's like, adventure? Oh yeah, okay, I have time for that.
Yeah. Now the call to adventure is like, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god. As just everything goes from bad to worse some days.
Yeah. Oh man, that reminds me too. I'm watching through BoJack Horseman right now for the first time.
Oh, what season are you
Um,
on?
I am in the middle of season 3. So you know, sad. No spoilers.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I've been, and it's a show I've wanted to watch for years, and yeah, da, 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 da. But like, it reminds me of Diane. Like, I think Diane is my favorite character on that show because amidst all of the chaos, here is a person in their 30s, and like, there's just something so cool about it in a very quiet way. It is quietly the cool thing that they're like, the writers decided, of all of this weird high concept, millionaire lifestyle shit that is going on in this show, we are just going to put a normal ass 30-year-old 30s character just doing 30s things. And like, yeah, it's just so compelling. And she's probably my favorite in the show. Like, just watching her be in a room full of all of these wacky characters and just be a person.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing that I love about Bianca. It's just seeing a person. It's like in the midst of everything else going on, It really just humbles everything. A person talked to a flying salamander god. A person is being haunted by a demonic presence. A person traveled through time to stop a heist. Like, yeah, it's just so cool.
And again, I'm not saying that all the other NPCs don't feel like normal people. I'm just saying that Bianca just actually, like, out of everyone, is the closest to a normal person. But
yeah,
Ryan,
like
she's
people...
lilac covered and has horns. Yeah, I know that. I'm saying, like, as her actual personality.
Yeah, like, she's the one that you can just pluck out and plop in the real world, and I wouldn't raise an eyebrow, Again, personality-wise. But, like, yeah, just, like, they're not, because all the others are, like, main character types with all their main character things going on, like, and I'm probably the easiest one to point at. Like, I'm playing mega orphan. Like, I'm the most orphan because I'm the main orphan. Like, that's what a lot of us do. We made, like, traditional main characters who are dealing with main character shit, and she's just a person. And the fact that ends up being equally as interesting is just so cool to me.
I mean, like, Felicity and I have talked about this a little bit. I don't think it came up on her episode of Roll Call. If it did, then this is retreading some ground, but I don't care. I want to make sure it gets said. But, like, I love the fact that, like, Bianca actually, like, it's become a meme, but I love the fact that Bianca, in that moment of, like, being pursued by, like, those corrupt guards, decided to shoot the horses instead of the people, because I thought it actually showed a great sense of humanity there, that she would rather kill these animals rather than potentially kill someone that isn't corrupt and is just, following their orders that they believe, oh, these guys are criminals, we gotta go get them. Because, while it has become this, wow, Bianca's such a badass, like, she shoots horses, but, like, that shows a lot of humanity and compassion and thought in that moment. Because I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but I am the person who it's like, and I've never had a pet, so perhaps I'm speaking from ignorance here, but I can't in my mind picture being like, if I ran into a burning building and, like, I saw my dog versus I saw a human being I don't know, I would save my dog over the human being. Like, I am not that person. I would save the human being.
I'm pretty sure Felicity would agree with you, and I would as well. I really, and you're right. It's we memed it because it was shocking. And I think the moment to me was shocking because of how, the kids went and got in trouble, and then they come running back, and they're in so much trouble that horseback guards are chasing them.
Yeah.
And without needing to know a single detail, Bianca was like, okay, I need to keep these people safe. Looks like you gotta go, horse. Like that was what was so funny and compelling about it. That she like had already decided in her mind that this group of weirdos I'm with is more important.
Mm-hmm.
But it is also like, yeah, I do find the sort of general population's attachment to like hurting animals more than hurting people kind of alarming. And maybe it's because I'm not a misanthrope, like I know humans are capable of the worst things in the animal kingdom, but I also do think we're capable of the best. And like,
Yeah.
I just don't, I'm not so detached that I think killing people is fine because they made those choices, and killing animals is bad because they had no choice. Like, I get the logic behind that, but it's just like, I don't know, like when they added dogs to The Last of Us Part 2, and people were like, oh man, I don't know if I can play this game anymore. It's like, how much glee did you take in murdering all those people in the first one? Like, I want an honest answer. Because I'm telling you right now, the point of that series to me was never to enjoy the killing. So the fact that there's dogs now shouldn't get in the way of you enjoying the killing, because that was never the point of the story. Like, that's not what's happening. These are some of the most humanized enemies in any game I've ever played. Like, you should feel bad. Like I just didn't get it.
No, I'm right there with you. I didn't feel bad at all. Especially because I never attacked anyone that didn't attack me first.
Right, like
I tried to stealth around, or if it's like, okay, well they're acting looking for me and killing me. Okay, here's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a whole nother conversation for another time, perhaps. Bianca's great. That was the whole point of
that. Yeah.
Oh man. All right, so Mark, thank you for your debut on favorites. That's going to be an ongoing segment, so I thought that went really well. All right, so we've been talking a lot about Illica, and we've been talking about a lot of the main 3 Illica campaigns, RWA, and so we're going to jump to Rising Ash, kind of the newest project that's come out in the past few weeks.
Yeah, this little indie startup.
Episode 3 came out like a couple of days ago. You've recorded through 4? Is that correct?
Not quite. We took a week off because one of our players, Cameron, is in Tech Week for his show.
Oh, nerd. No,
and
I'm just kidding.
I know, right? A theater kid playing Dungeons and Dragons. We just took a week off, but it was kind of the perfect time for that to happen anyway, because the first 3 sessions kind of ended up being the noir investigation roleplay half, and I think these next 3/4 are going to be the decision making half, where they start officially burning bridges and making hard choices.
I messaged you because I've been listening to Rising Ash, and so I'm current as of a few days ago when I listened to episode 3. But yeah, that was like the first thing I said to you was I loved the espionage feel of the campaign, because it's such a different feel from anything else that we've been doing in Illica. It's similar a little bit to like the Silent Shields, I suppose, which is also done by you. But yeah, I very much like the fact that it's almost like this, not like Suicide Squad, but it's just like this. It has the classic like, all right, we're getting this elite group, A-team style, Guns of Navarone style, where we have kind of like our experts in given field, and we're going to go and do this thing. And then, everything unfolds and things go wrong, and it's hard, and you don't know if they're going to succeed or not. But yeah, I'm loving it so far. Like, especially with it being only 3 characters, I feel like everyone's kind of getting their time and their moments to shine. It's always fun to see people playing different characters and using different things. Like, I just messaged Felicity, and I was like, oh, your character uses a halberd? That's sick. halberds are awesome weapons because like
absolutely.
I'm a history like buff and nerd. Like I love like I'm that DM who when someone's like I'm like, oh cool, what weapon are you using? They're like a longsword, and I'm like, yeah, but like what kind of a longsword? Like
Right.
I'm that guy. Same with a short sword. I'm like, right, but is it like a Kopesh? Is it like a Gladius? Like, you know, really paint the picture. Like, what does this weapon look like? Tell me. Because I love me my weapons. What can I say?
Yeah, I can tell, man. Your character's got some weapons going on.
Hell yeah, they do. But
the Patas was a great choice, though, I will say.
yo, like, I really just did it for the meme originally, and then the more I really looked into them, I was like, these are actually kind of sick. And in a D&D fantasy setting where we're like superhuman, these could be really, really, really cool. And they were.
Man. I want to make a fighter at some point that uses those. Oh, geez, I should know what they're called. But you know those swords that are almost like a ribbon of metal, where it's like it's almost like a whip, where it's just like this. You like use it on horseback, and you like whew, 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 just around.
Yes, like, yeah, I believe they're an Indian weapon.
Yes, I believe so, and I would totally play somebody that uses one of those, and then one of the shields that has a knife in the handle.
Oh yeah.
So you actually just distract them with your main weapon, and then punch them to death.
See, man. When it comes to coming ways to kill each other, humans are endlessly creative. But anyways.
Yes. Yeah.
But, so, for Rising Ash, we had this 6-week break, and it seemed like you were pretty Johnny on the spot with bringing up Rising Ash and kind of having something to fill the void. So, is this an idea that's kind of been going around for a while, or was this something that you just worked on very quickly and got it kind of just hit the ground running?
Yeah, it was an opportunity story. I did just hit the ground running. I knew that at some point I wanted to do mini arcs because I had a lot of fun doing the Silent Shield anthology. Well, I mean, I still am. No past tense. I'm doing it, and it's fun. You know, those are a lot of fun. And I, you know, before the time comes on the channel that I'm running a full, very long campaign like the main 3 right now, I wanted to kind of not only have fun, obviously, that's the main goal, but also to help Joe expand the lore of Illica by doing little things kind of like throughout the world that we're not really seeing because you know, it's a huge place.
Yeah.
And when we found out that Joe was just going to take a little bit of a hiatus, I thought to myself, well, this might be the perfect time to try it out. To just do like a little 6 or 7 session thing and see what happens. And I kind of just told everybody, like, I want to do it. I don't have an idea yet. I'll let you know. And I just dwelled on it for a bit, and I looked at continents on the map, or nations, I should say, on the map that we haven't really visited too much in the main 3 campaigns and don't know too much about. And I ended up realizing that Macavia plays a pretty big part in the lore with Tarkir. And we've been in Tarkir a notable amount. And with the Silent Shield, that's something I pull from there too, because the war between, you know, Macavia invading Tarkir only happened like 9 or 10 years ago. And it's a huge, like, social, political thing that, like, everybody in Tarkir remembers that happening and was affected by it in some way. And, you know, they're just responding. Did I say 10 years? It would be 10 years during Rising Ash. It would be 18 years during the main 3 campaigns.
Sure.
Not that that's super important, but yeah, I feel like I had to clarify that.
No, fair enough.
But so I really was like, okay, let's do something from the perspective of Macavians. Because obviously when they invaded Tarkir and then started getting aided by this primordial being known as the Eternal Winter, they were the bad guys. it's the old sketch with like, are we the baddies? Like, yeah, you were the baddies. Like you you messed up somewhere along the way. This was wrong.
And here we
Don't
are.
do this again. But obviously, like in the same way that in real life, just because you're from a country doesn't mean you like that country's politics.
Right.
Like not every Tarkirian loves the idea of a monarchy when there are other forms of government in the continent. And not every Maccabian is going to be like, hell yeah, theocracy. Like that's just not how it is, especially in more remote places removed from the watchful eye of the Empire. And so I started thinking about that, and that combined with a one-shot that I ran months ago with a few people on the server, which was it took place during the initial invasion of Tarkir, and they were playing as Tarkirians, but they had a prisoner of war who was like one of the prominent leaders of the Maccabian force that was coming in. And they interrogated her to try to figure out what was going on. And then the Eternal Winter and all the undead started showing up. And half of the Maccabians decided to keep going and, like basically ally with this huge undead force. And the other half of them said, no way. Like, we're completely, the ends do not justify the means. We cannot claim to be a theocracy of a pure and just God if we're allying ourselves with undead to get our way. And the prisoner of war they captured happened to be one of those latter. She couldn't do it once the undead showed up. And there was kind of a moral gray thing happening there. That character's name was Lady Melina, and now she's in Rising Ash. So those kind of ideas combined, and I thought, okay, what is she doing now? Like, what does your life become when you start a theocratic crusade and then stop?
Yeah.
Like, Tarkirians aren't gonna like you. Maccabians aren't gonna like you. Like, what do you do? And so that all kind of combined. And I would say from a design perspective, just outside of the world of Illica, two big inspirations. I had just finished watching like Apocalypse Now for the first time. It's one of those things that like, we've all got those movies that have been on your list for years and you just never watch them, and it's just like, you feel like you've absorbed it through osmosis because everybody talks about it all the time, so do you even need to watch it anymore? And
Right.
But I hadn't seen Apocalypse Now, and I watched it, and I was really compelled by the idea of this sort of like, these people in the distance who are just kind of doing the books and trying to like conquer this territory and make sure everything goes right. They don't really know what it's like on the ground, and sort of how much your sanity gets tested, going through all of this moral gray and chaos. And Marlon Brando's character in that film he's just lost it. He's clearly somebody that was well decorated and had a lot of pride and a moral spine at some point, and he can't do it anymore. And so that became kind of the main inspiration of like, you give the three PCs their assignment to go into this far off place where the Empire technically owns the land, but things are a little looser and there might be insurrection going on. And we sent this guy to deal with it, and he's off the rails. We don't know what he's doing anymore. And then I also just really like Fallout New Vegas. I'm actually replaying it right now as a sniper whose their biggest goal is to raid Caesar's camp and kill him personally. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, I love the design of that game. I love that it presents you a lot of ideas, like political and philosophical ideas, and it makes you understand that there really isn't a right thing to do here. Like, this is just a foobar situation.
Right.
And you need to make a call, and you need to develop a moral framework that lets you make whatever call you're going to make. But you need to get used to feeling uneasy about whatever choice you end up making. Because there's just... And that's not everyone's interpretation of the game. I mean, there are some people that are like, Mr. House is right, which, like... Okay. But, you know, like... you know, but that's a tangent. We don't need to... But, like... You know, but that sort of thing of like, you will feel uneasy and good people will be in your way and get hurt and nothing's going to go quite correct. Like, that's just it. But you need to make a call. And yeah, I just really love that sort of design idea. And so I tried to employ that in Rising Ash as much as I could. Yeah. And so now they've been presented with all the information and we're getting ready for a lot of conflict coming up. I think that these battles are going to be a lot of fun because of the amount of context behind them, but it's also going to be really interesting to see what remaining decisions they make about nuance, right? Because it's like Ambrose, this high exarch cleric that has gone off the rails, like, they have decided that he needs to be stopped. But what does stopped mean?
Yeah,
you know?
a little foggy on the details right now.
Yes, and I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see what they do. And I personally, I even remember, I told them after the end of session 2, where Bale basically inhabited the spirit of somebody, the main devil antagonist of the whole thing. And Bale said, if you go seek out Lady Melina, we're done. And then they did anyway, and then they immediately were met with a devil army that just kept growing and growing in size until they finally got away by the skin of their teeth. And yeah, I remember talking to the players afterwards, and they were kind of theory crafting with each other about, like, well, who is the Fallen, and who's, like, does Bale know the Fallen? What is this? You know, asking all these questions. And I was like, well, I'll be real with you. Bale had the answers to that, and now you will not hear them. Which is okay. I'm not like, shame on you. You had to make a choice. Like, there's no way to just, like, vibe through this whole thing without pissing anyone off. It's just not gonna work. But, you know, that was a path, and you said no. And now you're on this other path. And Lady Melina will have her information, and if you ever do have a conversation with Ambrose, he'll have his, but, like, you no longer have Bale's information. And I remember Cameron being like, Mark, run it from the top. Like, I want to see what happens, you know?
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, I just like, yes, exactly. But I love designing D&D that way, because I think it's the theater kid in me. The ephemerality of it is what's so cool to me. Like, you don't go back. It happened. And possibility, you know, doors were closed. And you just have to move forward now. And I, as the DM, have to adapt to whatever happened. You know, if there's something that really needs to happen for the story to make sense, but they're not going to the place it happens anymore, I gotta move it. I gotta make, you know, I'm doing as much adjustment as they are a lot of the time. But that it's so cool to me to design, like, quests like that in D&D, and to just do them the one way and see what happens. Knowing that there are multiple paths and there's no way to do all of them. I think that keeps me in the moment when I'm behind the screen, you know, like, I'm also waiting to see what happens because I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but, you know, I've very much been enjoying it, and I'm very excited to see how there's only going to be 3 more episodes, right? Like, that's the current plan.
Yeah, so it was going to be 6. It might be 7.
Okay. Yeah.
just because combat takes a bit.
Sure.
And the path that they've decided on, at least as of the end of session 3, was to go deal with the Ambrose thing, then figure out where the Fallen is and deal with that, and then await Bale's next move. So they want to engage with all three. Not fully, but they do want to engage with all three of them. And I want to just make sure I'm affording time for that to happen,
Sure.
without cutting corners. So it might be 7, but I don't think it has time to be much more than 7, because that'll be around the time Joe's getting back, and and the urgency of it is fun. Truly, it's kind of the other end of the coin of these really long campaigns that we've been doing with Joe. Is like having the space is really cool in its own ways, but the urgency is cool in its own way too. Like the executive producer tells you, your 14 episode script for season 1, we got you 8 episodes, kid. Figure it out. Like that's fun to me. Just figuring out how to. I mean, there's so much. Like Lady Melina in particular has become one of my favorite NPCs I've ever made, and I know there's a lot about her that we're not gonna talk about. Like she's a supporting character. She's here to support their journey and be an ally against the devils. But but that's fun. Knowing that you won't be able to talk about everything is really fun. I think that's how you know when you have a compelling story, is when there isn't time for everything, because the people feel real and you think about stuff that isn't directly tied to the plot.
Yeah, absolutely. Believe me, as someone who has come up with like 8 conspiracy boards for RWA and constantly working on them to try and figure out what the hell is going on with Emerald and the timeline in Joe's games, I understand.
Yep.
I've had many nights laying in bed staring at the ceiling being like, but how does this connect? And how can these two things be true at the same time? They can't be, or so is that. And I'm just, I think too much about this, Mark.
I understand. And I know I think I'm a little different. I've talked with this about like River a few times, and I think a few other people, but I think I'm a little different from a lot of the other players in that to me the fun is just like going for the ride. And so I really admire everybody that's able to sit in theory craft for a really long time. Because I don't know, it's just not how my brain works. Is I just don't like do a Sherlock's web with all the stuff. I experience Joe's campaigns thematically, there we go, more than literally, I guess. Like, I'm just really compelled by, like, what I said about the gardening and the weed and, memory and fathers and all that stuff with the tier thing. Like, I'm just really compelled by the ideas that keep coming back. And I think Joe he does a really great job with that, of, it's like poetry, it rhymes. But like having the, just having these ideas keep happening, like throughout the campaigns in, I don't know, there's something kind of mystical about it and sort of beautiful about like just people that have never met each other, just kind of like the universe giving them similar paths and for similar things to happen to them. I think it's really cool.
No, I agree. I mean, the whole community and experience in RWA is something that I'm just super grateful for, and so I'm forever grateful to Joe and for everyone who helped to just kind of make it a real thing and letting me be a part of it. Here we are now, doing a little talk show talking about how much we love these games and what they mean to us. It's just great.
Yeah, it is.
All right, Mark, I know I still had a lot more questions, but we've been talking for almost 2 hours now, so for now I think we're going to wrap it up here.
That is only fair, but you can rely on me for a part 2, part 3, part 4, and part 5 probably. Because
I can appreciate that.
I can talk.
All right, everyone. Thank you for coming to this episode of Roll Call, and we will see you next time.